Planet With returns for a second episode, which is just as wacky and fun as the first one, and might even be better in some respects. But it's still incredibly confusing and weird, and will someone just please get this kid some freaking meat? The second episode of Planet With, in many ways, is almost identical to the first. You can just sort of swap out some elements. The biggest difference here is that Kuroi is going to be battling against another member of Grand Paladin. There's also going to be a big scene with a giant unidentified flying object. In the last episode, it was a creepy version of a teddy bear. This one, it's a creepy version of a pig. A pig which also has arms and legs in swapped positions on its body. This is a weird show. Did I mention that in the last review? What is really great about this episode right here is that they finally start to expand on the actual story of this world, and they start to give us some hints as to what's actually going on. It's also worth mentioning that this episode has an opening and an ending, which also gives us some really good previews as to what could be potentially actually going on in this series. So let's just get back on track. This episode is all about Grand Paladin, this group of superheroes, the ones that we saw from the very first episode, initially consisting of 7, now they're down to 6, and they are worried about all of these big invaders that are coming, and this person who is potentially not only taking them out, but also stealing their power for some unknown reason. Now, the leader of this group is this giant dude with wavy hair and glowing eyes, and he totally paints himself as kind of like the villain of the series. But I really think that this is going to be one of those shows where you don't judge a book by its cover, mostly because they're not revealing everything to the viewer quite yet. We don't really know who the good guys or the bad guys are in the series. It's not necessarily black and white. But this group, Grand Paladin, is tasked with protecting the world from all sorts of danger. Like I said, the leader of this group almost comes across as a villain, and he even claims that he wants to be the leader of all of humanity. It's very strange, to say the least. I'm not quite sure what their ultimate motivation is going to be, but they're apparently fighting against this group, which goes by the name of Nebula. This is the group that Soya Kuroi is associated with, forcibly so, now that he's been taken in by a giant cat and a freaking gothic Lolita maid. And what apparently is revealed is that there are 2 different factions of Nebula. There are those who want to watch over humanity, and then there's others that want to forcibly make them evolve, because this is an anime that has giant mechs in it. They just want to take some cues from Evangelion, I guess. But all of that stuff is just a lot of loud noise. This entire episode right here is basically diving a little bit more into the members of Grand Paladin. I sort of see like a pattern forming here where a giant monster is going to attack. One of the members of Grand Paladin is going to go inside. We start to learn about their past, their history, their personalities. They fight against Soya, and they end up getting defeated. The cool thing is, at least in this episode, we get a much longer action sequence, which is really, really fun to watch. But again, a lot of the intrigue of the show comes from the fact that these characters don't really know what's going on here. It's all just so mysterious. They almost make it seem as if you should know what's really going on here, but ultimately it's still kind of confusing. I did like a scene in the middle of the episode, however, where it looks like Soya Kuroi is getting ready to go back to school, but the only thing he has to wear are these giant iron sandals, which completely weigh him down. This, combined with his overall fatigue and confusion of living in a house with a giant cat who's obsessed with 2D anime girls, causes him to freak out when suddenly the character he fought in the first episode, Torai, decides to show up sitting right next to him. He's a little apprehensive at first, as he feels that maybe this is going to start another big confrontation, but he's also happy over the prospect that this guy seems to be eating these meat buns. That seems to be the big joke with his character, is that he desperately just wants to eat some meat, something that his caretakers will not give him at all for some strange reason. And he actually ends up getting one of these meat buns from Torai as a gift, and right as he bites into it, after just getting ready to savor every single thing about it, he realizes that it's actually a dessert one, filled with sweet bean jam, pissing him off even more, and maybe even fueling his rage as he goes into battle later on in the episode. But really, this episode is about two characters, two members of Paladin. There's Mew and Haru, who seem to be the youngest members of the group. I don't even know how they were able to become superheroes. I'm not going to question that stuff at all. But just like the last episode, they actually fight against this giant unidentified flying object, and Mew decides to fly inside of this thing, and we go into her past a little bit. Apparently, she is some sort of judo champion, both her and Haru, and they had this like big match in the past where Mew apparently was able to take her down, and that's really all we learn about it. I'm not sure why all of these giant UFOs are giving all of these weird, pleasant visions to people. They don't seem to be coming across as something that's kind of malicious or bad in a way, but apparently these Grand Paladin guys have got to take them down. It's just a part of their job. After the last episode, Grand Paladin realizes that they're being targeted, so whenever they go through these big battles and they decide to leave after, they're going to leave in pairs of two. This way, if they end up getting attacked by Soya Kuroi, they'll at least stand something of a chance against him. And of course, this does end up happening in this episode where Mew and Haru use their very signature giant mech suits against Soya in another battle that is all sorts of surprisingly epic. I truly do love the way that the action scenes are actually executed in this show. They're done with a lot of gusto, and every single mech has a really unique design and their very own unique attacks. I like that they established that these two girls actually know judo, because they actually incorporated into their battle with a lot of these throws and takedowns that they use. But they also use big, ridiculous, outlandish attacks that you would expect from mechs, like this giant rolling attack, which basically transforms Mew's mech into a giant destructive yo-yo. And then, of course, you have the robot, which is used by the main character of the series, which design continues to surprise me with how incredibly fun and awesome it is, but I still love that it can actually transform its arms into giant hammers, and it actually utilizes that to defeat Mew's mech in this episode. And as she's getting ready to lose her power, falling out of the sky, Ginkgo, the gothic Lolita maid, manages to steal that away from her, and again, they have taken some more of this power. Why? For some mysterious purpose. The episode ends with Kuroi being triumphant in his battle, and he wants to continue to fight against this other member, Haru, but his sensei and Ginkgo decide that this is probably not a good decision and they should retreat. And that was definitely something that he should have considered, because all the other members of Grand Paladin show up confronting him at the very end of the episode, leaving us with a really great cliffhanger. So, what's the rundown on this episode of Planet With? I'm still not quite sure what this entire series is going to be all about or what it's going to be leading to, but honestly, getting to see how it's actually going to reveal itself in this mystery-style format seems really cool. But really, it's the character designs and the mecha designs and the action sequences which truly sell this one. That and how incredibly weird it is. It's also just got a really great sense of humor. This is a very funny anime series, and I love that it's not taking itself so seriously, although I have a feeling it is probably going to take a turn for the more serious the farther we get in on the series. But again, I think one of the coolest aspects of this show is we don't necessarily know who the good guys or the bad guys are at this point. You don't really know who to root for. I mean, it's obvious that you should go for the guys who are in the big glorious mech suits and act like superheroes, but there's definitely something darker going on here. That and then they finally start to establish that there's this group called Nebula, but they don't really say who Nebula is or what they do or what their overall plans are. Even the main character, when he learns this stuff, says, "This is all really confusing and I don't know what this is all about." And in some ways, I'm not even sure the creators quite know yet, but still, it's intriguing enough to want to keep checking out. Really, I'm in this show just to see where ultimately it's all going to be heading at this point. That and the fact that it seems to be having a lot of fun doing that, and it also has some surprisingly good production value as well. This is a really nice looking anime series, although like I said, this episode in many senses is almost identical to the very first episode, just aside from the fact that they're switching out some of these characters. Really, it's just a big mystery at this point, but if you're looking for an action anime series with some really cool mechs and superheroes and a confusing storyline that might reveal something interesting by the end, then check this one out. It's sort of like a mishmash of some of the craziest elements that I've seen from a lot of different mecha and superhero anime series, and I can't wait to see where it's going to be headed. I also should mention this one thing that I think is kind of cool that they established in this episode. Whenever Kuroi is actually wearing that weird V-styled mask and he's inside of the mech or anything, the other characters, when they see him, they don't actually see him at all. It's like this weird, distorted version of him. They're using some sort of technology that is making it so they can't quite perceive what he truly is. and I'm not sure why that actually is. Again, it's just a giant question mark of an anime series, but I have to admit that it is still a lot of fun, and that's exactly why I'm going to give this episode a 4 out of 5. It's Planet With, it's ridiculous, it's an anime series that a lot of people are not talking about right now, but something that I really think that you need to check out if you're into this style of anime. So there it is, that's my thoughts on another really crazy and super confusing episode of Planet With, but I would love to hear your thoughts about it, and you can tell me all of them in the comments section below, and of course what you guys are hoping to see from the rest of this ridiculous brand new mecha anime series. So thank you guys for watching this review, I'll see you guys next time, and as always, stay down now, baby.